morning, everyone. Thank you for
Good morning.
joining us. My name is Dr. Belkeis, and I am a psychologist and educator. I've been here in the UAE for over 25 years, practicing psychology and teaching psychology, and I'm also in academic administration. I'm joined here today with Miss Divya. Divya. Divya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Divya, and I have been in the UAE for the past 10 years, and I have great experience working with children because I was working in school before, and also adult psychiatry. So yes, I'm happy to be here with you, Dr. Belkeis. I hope this gets on to be a very useful and a wonderful session for all the parents who have joined.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for taking your valuable time to join us this morning. I know the weekends are precious to spend with family, and so we do appreciate you taking the hour to talk about bridging the gap between you and your teenager. All right. We have quite a few people who've signed up for the webinar. And we're just trying to make sure that people are able to catch the entire session. But why don't we go ahead and begin? It's a couple of minutes after 10. Why don't we go ahead and begin? Need the next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is an American writer who wrote this, and let's just take a few minutes to reflect on kind of what this is saying. Don't worry that children never listen to you. Worry that they're always watching you. One of the key points as a takeaway for this morning's session is that as parents, we often talk a lot to our kids, telling them what not to do, telling them what to do. But beyond that, I think sometimes we forget that our kids are watching us at all times. And because of that, we do need to kind of be careful, because what we do is then a model for them. And so we're going to talk about, later on, we're going to talk about parents, of course, as the first teachers for our children. And if we say to do something, but then we ourselves don't do it, there's going to be an inconsistency. And again, we're going to talk about some of this miscommunication later on in the presentation. So yeah, we're going to focus more on parents as individuals and kind of taking care of ourselves as parents throughout the session. Okay, next slide, please. All right, the agenda for today's session is the following. We're going to talk about some parenting challenges, some of the factors responsible. I would ask if everyone, please, if you could mute. Looks like we're getting some external noise in the background. Yes, thank you. We're going to talk about parenting styles and expectations that leads to. We're going to talk a bit about adolescent development and changes, some environmental factors, how to overcome the lack of communication and building trust, and a little bit more about Nafsology and our team here. Okay, so before we get into some of the parenting challenges, we'd like to send out a poll. Okay, so here we go. And if you could just answer this, please. What is the most challenging issue you face with your teen? Okay, and you could submit your answers. So do we have some responses? Okay, there we go. All right. So many of you are facing, looks like the top challenge is too much time spent gaming and online. Yes, very common issue parents are facing. And coming in second, poor academic performance and inability to communicate effectively. Okay. All right. Okay, thank you for that. We can see on the next slide that you're not alone. Some of the common issues coming up in the literature of issues parents are facing, and you can see them right there, from curfew times to choice of friends, time with family versus peers, school and work performance, driving privileges, dating and sexuality, social media and screen time, self-destructive behavior, and communication. And we're going to touch upon several of these issues throughout the presentation. Right. Next slide. So what exactly is creating the gap between you and your teenager? I mean, that is kind of the question that we ask in this webinar. And so the three factors we want you to consider, and that we're going to talk more in depth about, are the following. Next slide. We're going to look a bit more about the parent, the teenager, and the environment, and the interactions that are occurring amongst those three. And so we've put parent first because we cannot impress upon everyone the importance of we as parents taking care of ourselves. Again, remember we talked early on about our children watching us. And so if we are not okay as parents, then our children are not going to be okay. And so sometimes we look at the outcome and we say, oh, our children are not okay. And we see our children, whether it be acting up or, we see all these issues. And please, it's not to say that our children's problems are really our problems. That's not what we're saying. But what we're saying is that we really need to look at ourselves as parents and, where do we learn to be a parent? What's going on with us? And all of the pieces of we as parents, as individuals, before we even look at the teenager, because sometimes we want to identify what's happening with the teenager. But so we're going to first focus a bit about the parent. And please, throughout this webinar, we are only touching on issues. We're not really going to go in depth about any of these areas. But let's talk a bit about parenting behaviors. Next slide. So again, parent is as a first teacher, right? I think we would all agree that parenting is probably, if not the most difficult job we will ever do. Again, something that we're not told, right? When we start having kids, this is going to be the hardest job that you're going to have. And entails not only nurturing the next generation, so that they're competent, self-sufficient, confident, and productive human beings that have a good sense of self, who are in touch with all aspects of their health, whether it be emotional, psychological, physical, social, and spiritual. And so all of those pieces, no small order. And as parents, this nurturing and guiding begins at the very, not only once children are born, even before that. So as a parent, what were you feeling when you were pregnant with the child? What was the environment like for the growing fetus? And so we go back, because if a parent was stressed early on, then of course that environment will be a stressful one for the child. So although we're looking at teenage behavior and we're going to focus on teenagers, one of the things as parents we have to remember is that we understand parenting even before we begin to be parents, right? So where do we learn to be a parent? We often learn to be a parent from our parents. And unfortunately, many individuals don't have good models of what good parenting looks like. We all come from different places. We've all had different experiences of what parenting is. and what parenting is not. And so again, if we really even think about where did we learn to be parents? And so if we could just, if we could use the chat function, if you could use a chat function, just very briefly, I would ask those in attendance just to indicate where did you learn how to be a parent? If we could just take a couple of minutes and just indicate that. Just write in the chat. Is everybody able to write in the chat? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. So my parents, yeah. Literature. Yes. Okay. So for many people, it's books and friends and from their own parents. Great. Yes. Environment, experience. Yes. And again, if we had good models of parenting, that's great. Then we can model that, right? But unfortunately, not everybody has that. And then they're left with this model that may not be the best model for them to share with the next generation. Okay. Thank you for that. And a lot of books. Okay. So yeah, so we're learning parenting from different sources, right? And different cultural backgrounds as well. What is right for one group may not be right for another. I'm sure that you've heard about different kinds of parenting, whether it be helicopter, overindulgent, or traditional. There's a description of each of those. And I do want to preface this by saying that no one method is the right method or style. It kind of depends. For many of us, we might be in traditional families and where authority, there's a clear line of authority. And for those cultures, that is what is the appropriate style. For others, it's maybe more overindulgent. And for others, it's different. So kind of depending on, and again, these are just different styles of parenting. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Okay, so here we have, based on some research by the psychologist, her name was Diane Baumrin, and back in the 60s, when it was kind of not okay to be in control and kind of the authority figure. Parents kind of went in the opposite direction, kind of being too permissive. And so she developed these 4 styles of parenting, and you can see the characteristics of these 4 styles and with particular outcomes as well. And so what the literature has shown is that the best, if you will, type of parenting is the authoritative, not authoritarian, but authoritative, where parents are warm and responsive, there's clear rules, high expectations, they value independence, and it seems to produce higher academic performance, individuals with good self-esteem, good social skills. So if we compare that style to maybe the more permissive style or negligent style, where there are fewer or no rules, and kids are not quite sure kind of what to do, when to do things. And I mean, of course, all of you are zooming in today. So I mean, I would expect that none of you are uninvolved because you've already shown that you care about, you care about your parenting by zooming in. But you'd be amazed at how many parents really are very uninvolved in their children's lives, in what's happening at school, and they're doing one thing, and they're not quite sure what their children are doing. And so, and remember, one of the things that when we talk about parenting style is we are parenting our children in a particular way. And then when we talk about the adolescent and we talk about their peer group, their peers are being parented in different kinds of ways. And so we're going to have this interaction as well, which will make your jobs as parents even more difficult, because we can't say that, okay, you're going to be, let's say you're going to take on a parenting style, an authoritative parenting style, and the outcome will be positive. Well, there's also the interaction your children are having with others in their environment. And so there is a particular survey or test assessment that one can take to see what kind of style you are. However, I mean, you can read this list and kind of get a sense of where you stand, not even looking at the outcomes, but just kind of looking at the characteristics of that particular style. So again, using the chat, if you feel comfortable, you don't have to, but if you feel comfortable in looking at the characteristics, what kind of parenting style do you think you have currently? Now, the good thing about this, let's say you're exhibiting or you're displaying a certain style now. You can modify your style. That's the beauty of change. You can say, okay, this is what I'm doing now, but I really want to try something else. And you can kind of set in motion those steps to change. And so if you could use the chat again, and again, only if you're comfortable, please. So authoritative, yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Okay, excellent, excellent. It's so interesting, you know, that yeah, most of you. Well, I mean, like I said, I would have kind of expected that as well from the group. That many of you are already at authoritative parenting styles. This is great. Okay, all right, great. Thank you for sharing. All right, and let's look at. So again, kind of looking at the parent and what the parent is experiencing. Now you have your teenager, and again, we've only very just kind of glossed over kind of parenting. We can really go in depth with you as a parent, because it really does start with all of us as parents. And so at the very beginning of the session, we said, if we are not okay, then of course our children cannot be okay. And so we really have to be mindful of the various dimensions of health that we are experiencing and trying to address those for us to be the best parents that we can be. Okay, so what's happening with the child? So the teenager has hit puberty, right? So sex hormones are being produced. There's all kinds of bodily changes happening for girls 9 to 13, boys 10 to 11. We get menstruation. We get for girls, we get wet dreams for boys. And then we have all of these physical changes happening that make a lot of young people very self-conscious, because if parents haven't told them about these changes, or for them to anticipate these changes, then it could be a surprise. And for some, it might be a really scary kind of experience. So when girls and boys experience puberty differently, you know, there's the guys want to be muscular, the girls want to be smaller and thinner, and depending on how their bodies mature, they may have different kinds of responses. So, for example, if girls mature, if their body starts to change earlier, then they may feel more self-conscious than if they matured later. And for the guys want to start looking like men, right? Kind of having all these physical changes earlier. And so if they don't, then again, they're going to be more self-conscious, and they may exhibit kind of self-esteem concerns as well. So all of these different changes leave kids really, really confused with not only the who am I piece, but my body's changing. What does this mean? And all of the various changes they're trying to make sense of. And for parents, we have to guide them in this process of change. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So the teenage years are ones of great growth and development, physically and emotionally. So we kind of said that, yeah. Adolescents are figuring out who they are, separate from their parents. And I thought this was an important piece. Melatonin, which is a hormone to get us to sleep, for adolescents, adolescents produce this 3 hours later than children and adults. So for an adolescent to really get to sleep, their sleep hours will be later than, again, children and adults. So sleeping after 11 is very common. This is when naturally an adolescent would want, his body would, or her body would want to go to sleep. And so with early school timings, which our schools are early, those of you who are on the roads early, taking your kids to school or going to work, it's really a shame for kids, because teenagers are not getting enough sleep. If they're going to sleep after 11 and they're waking up 5 or 6 to be able to go to school at 7:30, it really isn't enough sleep. And that's why for some places around the world, they have later school timings to kind of, they understand that, especially for teenagers, they need not only more sleep, but they often aren't getting the quality sleep that they need. And so we have intense emotions and mood swings caused by lower levels of serotonin and dopamine and higher levels of testosterone for boys. And so, again, another key piece of the teenage years is that the teenage brain is growing until the early 20s. So this is a very critical time for teenagers. And if we think about it, there's, because of all of these changes in environmental kind of factors, that the experiences that our teenagers have as their brains are growing can greatly affect their development. And we'll talk a little bit more later about what kinds of environmental factors, whether it's the whether we put individuals in enriched environments or maybe more impoverished environments, whether teenagers, the introduction of substances as well will greatly affect the brain and the brain's development. So there's a lot of things for parents, for us to kind of be aware of as a child transitions to adolescence, and then as an adolescent transitions into adulthood. Next slide, please. Okay, now this slide is really the kind of the takeaway here is irrespective of kind of different theorists will talk about kind of psychosocial development of what's happening with the identity development for adolescents, maybe the moral development, ethical development, and then also the cognitive development of the adolescents, and kind of taking from early adolescence to late adolescence. But in a nutshell, what we need to be mindful of is that there are many physical, sexual, cognitive, social, and emotional changes that can cause anxiety and anticipation for young people. And so as young people try to kind of separate from their parents and try to form an identity of who they are. And so it'd be very common, you often see teenagers with purple hair or green hair, or, they'll have different hairdos, or they'll, want a unique hairstyle. And it's really for them, it's trying to differentiate themselves from others. And they do that in often extreme ways, and sometimes ways that parents may not like, but it is a way of them trying to say, I'm developing into my own person. And so whether that's in identity development, cognitive development as well, as adolescent develops, they are becoming more critical. They want to make sure that what parents say is in fact true. And they will often pick up in inconsistencies in what we say, and they'll very happily point it out. We will also see kind of the abstract thought developing, and so they will become more ethical in their decision making as well, and it will become more fine-tuned. And so again, all of these various changes, if an adolescent is not aware of all of these changes, they may think, what's happening to me? I'm thinking unusually. Is there something wrong with me? Or I'm feeling particular ways, I'm having these thoughts. Maybe I'm kind of strange. No, all of these changes are here because of all the many changes that are happening, not only developmentally, but then also cognitively as well. Okay, so again, All right, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, and so the kind of the purpose of this slide is really a greater understanding as well of the brain's development again. And we all know that the brain is what we call brain plasticity, or neuroplasticity, meaning the brain is developing, right? And it's through various kinds of environments. It is changing, it is growing, it is reorganizing. And so often it's really important to put adolescents in environments where the brain is going to grow. And you know, in various activities where they'll have experiences that will make them think about things, will make them meet different people, problem solve. These are environments that are going to help a child. And so we mentioned here the amygdala. You know, so often teenagers are very quick to respond, and they will respond emotionally. And sometimes they'll get angry very quickly. And so because the prefrontal cortex hasn't yet fully developed and it's still developing, they will often respond in particular ways. And so as parents, we have to understand it's like, okay, it's not really towards me. It's the brain is developing. And so we really do have to give a lot of concessions, if you will, for our adolescents as they're growing, because these changes are quite, for some, they don't even understand what's happening. And so because we understand, we have to say, okay, yeah, that's their amygdala talking. It's not their you know, the prefrontal cortex hasn't yet developed. And so let me wait a couple of years for them to be able to understand that. But I guess the tightrope we often have to walk as parents is that our kids are often being placed in situations where they have to make higher order kind of thinking decisions, and yet they may not be there yet. So whether it's the decision to you know, try substances or not, the choices that they will often have to be made are adult choices, but they're not yet ready to understand the full consequences of decisions. This is why you have so many kids getting into trouble, not fully aware of the consequences of many of the decisions, lifelong decisions that they're making. And so as parents, we have to help them understand not only what's going on, but kind of prepare them for what they may face in the environment as a way of kind of inoculating them from potential dangers or kind of these stressors that they're going to face, so that they can be ready for it. They will understand that, okay, I may face this. What are my options? And what can happen if I make particular choices as well? And so as parents, we have to be the ones using our prefrontal cortex. While the kids are making these emotional decisions, we have to be the ones to explain to them why it is that taking substances at a later age would be wiser than experimenting early on, but understanding that they may in fact experiment because they don't yet have the kind of long-term planning in place for them to withhold that what they perceive to be an immediate gratification because friends have told them that they can relieve anxiety or they'll feel better if they take on a substance, for example. So again, more of the understanding of what's going on biologically and physically with our teenagers. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, again, these are not all of the environmental factors, but just some of the environmental factors, not only what's happening with the teenager, but then what's happening in environment in general. And remember, we at the very first image that we had of the different factors and the interaction between these factors. So we have work-life balance for parents. We also have school life balance for kids, teenagers. We have various cultural diversity kinds of things happening in the environment. We have prejudices, discrimination. We have microaggressions happening, self-doubt, marital relationship problems for both parents and teenagers. Bullying happening, financial difficulties, adjusting to life changes, lack of social and spiritual support. I know, just saying that made me tired. And so a lot of people don't know that change is stressful on teenagers and then also on parents. And so here you have a teenager experiencing all of the different changes that are happening just in terms of their own body. And then we have parents also experiencing, various changes as well and stressors in their environment. And all of these, all of these changes causes stress. And so there's something called a life change index test that suggests that the more life changes, the greater the chance of illness. And so again, the more that environmental factors then intersect and interfere with what's happening with the parents and the teenager, the more complexity that's going to be, and the more understanding that's going to take to say, okay, yeah, I get it. There have been a lot of changes that are happening with the teenager, a lot of changes was happening with the parents. No wonder there's going to be some conflict or misunderstandings that happen. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so please keep in mind that adolescence is a time for testing, breaking dependent ties, and establishing new identity. That's part of what every adolescent needs to do. And most teenagers can't think ahead of the consequences of their actions. We've talked about that because that part of the brain is still not yet developed fully. And they are in a stage of pointing out inconsistencies between our words and our actions. And those of you who have teenagers, all of you do have teenagers, you know that, yes, they are very happy when we are inconsistent in our words and our actions. You said that whatever it is that we said, and look what you did. You did something different. So at the start of the presentation, we talked about modeling for our kids, for our teenagers, the kinds of behaviors we want to see in them. And so it becomes very, very important for us to do the same. Okay, next slide. Ask yourself if we are comparing our teenagers to others. And many parents do this, will say, oh, so-and-so's kid got a 4.0 GPA. Why is it that you're just barely passing your classes? Are we setting too high expectations? Of course, we need expectations. We want to set high expectations, but not too high. We want our kids to be able to reach the standards and the expectations that we have for them. Are we constantly criticizing and nagging them? And sometimes we don't realize it. Sometimes it takes for someone else to let us know, hey, you're kind of hard on your teenager. Maybe lighten up a bit. Are we too busy with demands and stressors that we are not able to see what our teenager is going through? And it's hard, because if we're going through remember we talked about the parents, if we're going through our own stuff, it's hard then for us to take care of others. And so this is why really one of the takeaways for this presentation is really for all of us as parents, really it's so important for us to take care of ourselves. Again, and the last point, really taking care of ourselves fully in terms of what does it mean? When is the last time we went for a physical checkup? When is the last time we've gone in for a mental kind of checkup, like a mental health checkup? Not that there's anything wrong, but everybody needs somebody that they can, kind of an objective source that they can, whether it's bounce ideas off or you're facing something and you want to talk things through, everybody needs that. And so again, taking care of ourselves in the best possible ways. And our children will see us take care of ourselves, and they'll know that is a value we have, and they will want to take care of themselves as well. Okay, next slide. Okay. And then kind of seeing things from their point of view. They're going through all these major physical and cognitive changes. There are changes in hormones that affect behaviors and emotions. They're often feeling self-conscious about the changes, not sure whether these changes are good or bad. How is it they fit in with their peers? A lot of school demands. Adolescence is a time of great change and trying to figure out who they are and what they're going to do in the future. The pressure to fit in and to conform, and yet to be an individual. And already that seems like a conflicting message, right? So you want to fit in with your friends, but then you also want to be an individual. So there's a lot of peer pressure. And again, we said the parents can model consistent values that demonstrate their actions. And teenagers will see through our actions what it is that we value. Okay, so we're going to talk in the next segment about bridging the gap and communication. Divya.
Thank you, Doctor. All right, so it was very important for us to lay down the probable reasons why the teenagers behave the way they do, because a lot of times it makes it more easier for any individual if we know the reason. We are more compassionate and understanding, and we don't get into an argument kind of thing. So, for example, if you and your partner are having a conflict, and your partner is in a very bad mood, but you know the fact that there's some stresses going on at his workplace, you are more conscious of what you're saying. You're more conscious that what he's going through, and so the argument doesn't get into a very bad shape, right? So that's why it's very important for us to understand the probable reasons why the teenagers behave the way they do. The second part of our presentation, we would just touch upon few points how you can develop or build your communication, because I feel communication is the key for any it's a solution for any problem, right? So of course it's a very huge topic. It requires a lot of time and more detailed explanation of how to develop your communication skills with your teenagers, but because of course in 1 hour we cannot finish such huge topics, so we will just bring out few points which you can use it in your with your teenagers. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so the first and most important problem in communication between the parents and the teenagers, I feel, is confused communications. For example, a lot of times while working with students also, I have come across parents with this common problem where the children, they feel that in some situations, the parents tell them that, oh, you're a grown-up person now, and you still need my help in, setting up your room, your clothes. But on the other hand, when the parents may be having a conversation, if the child, if the teenager puts up their point, they would be just they would be told that you are too young to talk about this. So there is a dual kind of communication wherein at some times in certain situations parents make the teenager feel that they have grown up, while in other situations they make them feel that they're still a child, right? So now it's very important for you all to understand that teenage is an age wherein every individual is trying to understand their individuality, understand what they are, who they are. There's a lot of identity confusion going on in their minds. So it's very important that whenever we have a conversation, we involve the teenager as part of an adult. Okay, so if at all you want to give that sense of responsibility, of course every parent would want that the teenager grows up to be a responsible person, and even during their teenage they are more responsible. So how do you do this? Now you kind of give that responsibility by trusting them that you have grown up. And it should be consistent in all situations. It cannot be very situational kind of thing that at times you say this and at times you say another thing. So make sure that in all situations you transmit the same information to your teenager that now you have grown up. Okay, so try to involve the teenagers in any kind of discussions that are family related. For example, if you're planning to buy a new appliance for your house, or you're planning to do some changes in your house, always try to involve your teenagers. They should be made felt that, okay, I am a grown up person, so I have been involved in the decision making for the house. This is the way that you are developing that sense of responsibility. And also the teenager starts feeling that, okay, my parents are trusting me, my parents feel that I'm a responsible person. And that's how it will start reflecting in very many areas of their life. Okay, so it's very important to have as stronger communication in terms of giving them the responsibility that they are grown up. All right, so without any confused statements. Next slide, please. Now, a lot of times, you may also have experienced with your partners as well, that when someone is talking, when your other partner is talking, we are mostly with our gadgets. We are somewhere listening to what they're saying, but then we respond when we are, using gadgets, or we are doing some work. We are not actually looking at the person who is talking and responding to them, having the eye contact. So this is the same pattern that teenagers also model and learn and follow. So make it a pattern, or make it a habit, that when your teenager is talking to you, please keep aside all your gadgets or your work and give them 5-10 minutes and really listen to them. You may be really listening to them, but then the body language also is very important to translate to the person that, yes, I am listening. So always try to see yourself in the other person's perspective. So how would you feel if someone is responding to you while looking somewhere else, watching TV, looking at the phone, doing some work? So it does not communicate in a way that, yeah, this person is actually listening. So you should listen with your ears and your body, your eyes, and your whole attention should be towards the person who is talking to you. It makes a lot of difference when you have this pattern of communication, because that's what you're teaching your child, that this is the way you have to communicate, this is the way you have to listen, right? So because most parents also used to complain that my child is not listening, they're always with their gadgets. So just give it some time to reflect, where did it come from, right?
Divya, can I just add to what
Sure.
you're saying? You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. Let me just add too that often our teenagers will approach topics that they think or they're trying to guess whether we're okay with hearing these topics. So they may kind of drop just like an introduction to what they really want to talk about, and they're waiting to see if we're comfortable listening to it.
Right.
And so please remember, if you ask your teenager about whatever it is, any topic, if you ask the teenager, please be ready to really hear what they have to say and don't shut them down. We can't ask them and then not like what they say. And then judge it or get upset about what they say. So no, it's really, really right. Listen, all of the different senses as we listen, and be open to whatever it is the teenagers is telling us.
So this also opens up a lot of chance for the teenager, because a lot of parents complain that, they don't share secrets with us, they don't talk to us about a lot of things. So when you give that open space, when you keep that doors open because every person is testing if my parent is open to it or not. So once you give that leeway to your child that I am open to talk, they will come up with any topic they feel or they are confused or they need help with, and they'll not shy it or discuss with some other person, and maybe they might not get the actual right answers to their questions. All right, next slide, please. Now, how to handle conflicts. Now, I'm sure we also, when we were teenagers, we had a lot of conflicts with our parents, of course, with all the biological and environmental factors, which we've already discussed. When we have a conflict, now what do? Focus on one issue at a time, right? So we need not talk about things that have happened in the past, because then the child will start thinking that my parent is nagging, okay, it's a done thing, still they talk about it, and they would not be open or comfortable talking to you about anything that they're going through, right? Set a good example by apologizing when you're wrong. So there's nothing wrong in saying sorry or apologizing, because that's what you're teaching to your child. It's like you're modeling the behavior. So when any person feels that the opposite person is apologizing for their mistakes, their negative emotions towards that person reduce drastically, right? That's how even we feel for any person who does wrong, and if they apologize, we're just it's easier for us to let go and forgive. That's the message that you're passing on to your teenager, that it's okay to apologize, it's great to apologize, and this is how you're modeling. Establish reasonable house rules in consultation with your teenagers. So always have rules which are important that even you follow. All right. So most of the conflicts arise with the topic of using too much gadgets, right? So you feel that your teenager is spending too much time with their phones or with their laptops, their iPads. So it's very important that you lay down these rules as house rules and not specific to the teenagers, right? So if you have a rule that you can use gadgets for this from this time to this time for your leisure, right? At times, of course, we have work to do, and that's a different thing, which if we possibly explain to the child, they would be in a position to understand. So, but if it is for leisure or at night time, this is the time limit, that 10 o'clock is the time that we have to close all our gadgets. It should be applicable as much as possible to every individual in the house. So we are not differentiating the teenagers because you are younger to us, so you cannot use gadgets beyond this time. If it is a house rule and it is applicable for everyone, it's very difficult for the teenager to cross question or argue or stand against this decision, because it is for everybody, right? Be prepared to compromise when negotiating. It's very important that at times you may not be in a position to make the teenager completely walk through the path that you have set for them. So it's okay to compromise. It leads to a much better developed relationships, because they also feel that you are giving them the freedom and independence to choose. Focus on the current issue of behavior. Avoid general statements about your child. So like I've already mentioned, that whenever you're having a discussion with your child, try not to bring up the points of the past, right? So it should be based on the current behavior and not have general statements like, you're always like that, you always talk bad about you're always talking negative about people or the situations, or so try to avoid the general statements as much as possible and stick to the current topic. Next slide, please. Remember, don't take their actions personally. Of course, they are themselves going through a lot of changes There's a lot of confusion with their identity, and it is quite conflicting in their minds to kind of discover who they are, what they really want to do, and what profession or where they want to see themselves 10 years, 15 years from now. So it's not an easy journey. They might be going through a lot of pressure from school and, friends. There's a lot of bullying going on as well in a lot of situations. So try to understand that they're not targeting you and it's not directed towards you. It's because what they're going through, it just comes out on you a lot of times, because we show our anger and our aggression to people whom we really love, right? And it is the safe environment where I actually burst out my emotions. So try to understand that it is not, don't take it personally, right? Understand that teens need you, but they also are looking for increased independence. So it's important for us, like the first point that I said, that give them that independence to be a part of the decision making. It develops that sense of independence in themselves. How we, the small points can make a huge difference in developing that sense of independence in your child. You need to be a little bit vulnerable to give them permission to be vulnerable with you. So if at all your child is reacting in a very vulnerable kind of situation or an emotion, give them that space, that it is okay to vent your emotions in front of me. That's how they would come to even vent their happy feelings, to talk about good things. They need that space to just release it. So it's okay to give them that. You should make them feel that you are safe and secure with me, and it's okay to be vulnerable with me, than reacting in a very negative way, because eventually then they will stop communicating or showing their vulnerability to you. So they will test you first. They will see what the situation is, how your reactions are. So for every child, your reaction is the doorway for their next conversation, right? Next slide, please. So these are the sources where you can get more information on parenting with teenagers or bridging the gap with teenagers. Like I said earlier as well, it's a huge topic to cover. So we have just brought out few pointers. We are planning to have a proper workshop on bridging the gap, where we can focus on more detailed, you know, communication skills or detailed topics, how you can develop that or bridge the gap with your teenagers, somewhere in October. So if you're interested, you can just at the end of the session you would receive a feedback form. So you can fill in the feedback form as soon as the session ends, and let us know if you're really interested in these kind of topics. Next slide, please. This is just an introduction to our team. So we are a diverse team with our psychiatrist, Dr. Izin. We have Ms. Nashwa, who is the managing director. There's me, Dr. Belkeis, and Firdaus. So this is our team. And we have a new addition, Ms. Natasha as well. So we have multilingual groups, so to cater to different language groups and different society groups, so people can connect much better with therapists. Next slide, please. So this is about our vision about our center. So we are here to transform your life with expert guidance and passionate care. Next slide, please. So these are our services. So we have psychiatry services, individual therapy, child and adolescent therapy, We have corporate services as well. We have couple therapy, workshops and events, and also psychoeducational and clinical assessments. Next slide, please. Okay, so why us? So we are licensed by DHA and CDA. We have qualified professionals with more than 30 years of experience. We are multinational. We have Western, Arabic, Turkish, Asian. We speak 6 languages, including English and Arabic. Evidence-based tailored therapy plans, respecting human uniqueness and cultural considerations, mental health services to individuals of all ages, corporate schools, universities, etc., offering comfortable, relaxing setting with highest level of confidentiality and professional considerations. Next slide. All right, thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions, we can just pick up a couple of them.
There is one, Divya, huh?
Okay.
Question: how would you find the balance between understanding and supporting an adolescent's development, finding themselves and trying new things, with parenting from a cultural and religious family script, which may cause significant disparities and issues? So that's one question. And then as a follow-up, how can an external professional support parents with these disparities? Can I?
So,
I'll take. You go. No, please, Divya, go ahead, and then I'll chime in.
Okay. What I feel is, see, the fact that you're understanding that there is a discrepancy like that, it's very important for you to understand that every child has a different way of, especially because you are in a country where there are different, variety of cultural backgrounds. So they probably, it's very difficult for them to relate to the parents' culture or parents' family script. So I would request you all to, at the current state, give them that freedom and not push them to follow your own family script, right? Because again, you are giving them that independence to choose and follow what their perspective is. Eventually, probably when they are 10 years or 7, 8 years down the line, they would follow the same family script as yours. But if you try to push them to follow something that you want them to follow, as we always say, adolescent age is a very rebellious age, and they would definitely try to go against what you push them to do. So it's like a spring. So as much as you push them harder, it'll just jump off your hands. So try to give them that freedom to choose. Yes, Dr. Belkeis?
Yes, no, I was going to say the same thing, that these family scripts are really our scripts that we have inherited from the parenting that we received. And so we just have to be very careful, because our children are their own people. And so they are kind of forging a path that will be very different from ours. And of course, as parents, we may think that our values, our ways are what we want for our children. And our children may decide, in fact, that they want something different. And so the question 2 was, how can an external professional support parents with these disparities? It really is then dealing with our maybe even sense of loss that our children don't share maybe these scripts that we have. And so it really is us coming to terms with the disparity rather than the adolescents. Because Divya, you did say something that often, even as children find their way, much of the foundation that we have built for them, many do tend to kind of revert to what they have been taught. It may take a while, and there may be kind of many kind of meanders, but eventually, they kind of perhaps come back to the script. But again, one could maybe then argue, is this script, it worked for us, but is the script really what will work for the teenagers and kind of the future? So even that could be, could be arguable. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. And then Okay, so there's
I
other
also feel
questions.
that,
Yeah.
the second part of it, the external professional. See, when we are doing a webinar, we are talking in general, right? We are not getting deep into the family dynamics. So when we have a professional support, we understand the family dynamics. Every family is different, and the support is planned in terms of looking into the dynamics of the family. That's how it becomes more tailor-made and customized, and that's how it is more effective when we are looking at parent-child relationship or family dynamics in general. That's the way external professional support helps.
Okay, and another question here. How can we deal with difference and diversity at schools with others that are different?
I can't find that question.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, how can we deal with difference and diversity at school with others that are different? Okay, so I feel that this is the way that when we give that, it isn't that a positive thing of diversity experiencing in the classroom, because I feel that the current generation is so that we cannot confide them to just being in a one particular country or between one particular society, right? So having this diversity, they having knowledge about multicultural and multinational people, so it would make them more adaptable whenever, if at all they plan to travel somewhere else, and it opens their horizons to understand and adapt to different cultures very easily. So I feel it is a positive point of having diversity in school.
No, absolutely. And opens them up to the world
Yeah.
and different
Yeah.
worldviews. And in fact, it kind of presents an opportunity for parents to teach children about differences and how we can learn from these differences. And if we look at irrespective of where we are in the world, that it is the differences where we learn from each other and we add on knowledge and information and understanding. And so, no, diversity is in fact kind of what is needed in the world. And so, yes, many conversations that can happen around that. Okay.
All right.
I don't seem like I have any more questions. And so thank you so much again for taking time to be with us this morning. Have a wonderful week.
Please remember to fill in the feedback form.
And if you feel that you would like to talk about any of these issues more in depth, please, if you feel that we can help you, please look us up. Thank you.